Around 1 in the morning, on a highway in New Hampshire, a police officer found a woman parked on the shoulder, too upset to drive. She told him something with red lights had followed her car for 12 miles. He figured she was tired or seeing things, and he sent her home. 1 hour later, a teenager pushed through the door of the Exeter police station, shaking, and told the desk officer the same thing.
The buried files.
This is the incident at Exeter, New Hampshire, September 3rd, 1965. The witnesses were a teenager, a woman on the highway, and 2 policemen on duty. The Air Force opened a file on this night, and the file ended in a letter. When we get there, I will read you the one sentence in it that matters. The teenager's name was Norman Muscarello. He was 18. He had graduated from high school that June, and he was 3 weeks away from leaving for the Navy. He had sold his car to get ready for it. So when he visited his girlfriend in Amesbury, 10 miles away, he hitchhiked. That night there was almost no traffic, and he walked most of the way home. A kid on an empty road at 2 in the morning with 3 weeks left at home. Somewhere outside Kensington, he noticed 5 red lights over the trees ahead. They were bright, they blinked in a pattern, and they hung over the trees attached to nothing he could see. The field under them glowed red. So did the walls of 2 houses along the road. Then the lights came toward him. He said the thing behind them was huge, maybe 80 or 90 feet across, and it made no sound at all. Norman did the only sensible thing available. He threw himself into the ditch. When the lights eased back toward the field, he ran to the nearest farmhouse, the Russell place. He pounded on the door and yelled. Nobody answered. He ran back to the road, flagged down a passing car, and got a ride into Exeter. One thing came out later. The Russells admitted it. They were home. They were awake. They heard him pounding on the door. They were too frightened to open it. At the station, the desk officer, Reginald Toland, knew Norman. Now he watched this kid stand there, pale, barely able to get the story out. Toland radioed Officer Eugene Bertrand. Bertrand had something to add. He was the one who had sat with the woman on the highway an hour earlier, the one who had sent her home. Now the same report was standing in front of him, in a different person, in the same night. Bertrand drove Norman back out to the field. His working theory was a helicopter or a scared kid's imagination. They sat in the cruiser for a few minutes and saw nothing. So Bertrand got out and walked into the field with him to show the boy there was nothing out there. That is when the horses started. In the corral by the farm, the horses began neighing and kicking at the fence in the barn. Dogs started howling, one property after another. Then the object came up from behind the trees with no sound. Bertrand described it plainly. A huge dark object, as big as a barn, with red flashing lights on it. It hovered about 100 feet away and about 100 feet up. It rocked back and forth the way a leaf falls through air. The 5 red lights blinked in a strict order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then back down. 4, 3, 2, 1. The full cycle took about 2 seconds, over and over, bright enough to turn the field red around them. A second officer, David Hunt, pulled up and stood with them. 3 men now, 2 in uniform, watching the same thing. None of them heard an engine. Later that night, a bomber passed over, and Hunt made the comparison out loud. You could tell the difference. There was no comparison. Eventually, the thing moved off over the trees, and the men went back and wrote it up. By morning, it was a police report. Within days, the Air Force was in Exeter. 2 officers from Pease Air Force Base interviewed all 3 witnesses and asked them to keep it out of the papers. It was too late for that. The Manchester paper already had the story. The base major wrote up his findings for Project Blue Book, the Air Force's official investigation into cases like this. His memo said he was unable to arrive at a probable cause. It called the 3 observers stable, reliable persons, especially the 2 patrolmen. 5 bombers had been in the air that night, and the major wrote that he did not believe they had any connection to the sighting. Washington had answers anyway. The Pentagon told reporters the witnesses had seen stars and planets twinkling through a temperature inversion. Blue Book suggested a military exercise called Operation Big Blast, which had aircraft over the region that night. The first answer had a problem. 3 men had stood under the thing at 100 feet, and it had turned the field red around them. The explaining did not go well on the ground either. At one point, an Air Force officer set out to prove something simple, that the base's own lights were behind the reports. He ordered the lights switched on while people watched the sky. Nothing changed. He called the order in again, and the answer came back over the radio. The lights were already on. For Bertrand and Hunt, this was not a funny story. They were patrolmen being told, in the national press, that they could not tell a planet from an object the size of a barn, so the two of them wrote directly to the Pentagon's investigation and asked for the record to be corrected. Their letters said the object was absolutely silent, with no rush of air from jets or chopper blades whatsoever. It said the thing had no wings and no tail. And it answered the exercise theory with one fact. The exercise had ended nearly an hour before the sighting began. They signed their names to all of it. In February of 1966, the answer came back. It arrived from the office of the Secretary of the Air Force, on letterhead, over a lieutenant colonel's signature. "This is the letter I promised you, and this is its sentence. Based on the additional information you submitted to our UFO investigation office at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio, we have been unable to identify the object you observed on September 3, 1965. That became the Air Force's official position on what those 3 men saw. Blue Book shut down a few years later, with Exeter still in its unexplained column. There was more that summer than one night. For weeks before September 3rd, people around Exeter had been reporting the same kind of lights. A writer named John Fuller came up, interviewed witnesses, and put the reports on a map. Many of them lined up along one path. It was the route of a transmission line, the kind strung on tall steel towers, carrying 345,000 volts. That line crosses near the very field where the officer stood. Skeptics have leaned on that line ever since. One theory says the witnesses saw corona discharge, a glow that high-voltage equipment can throw off in the right conditions. The strongest theory came decades later. It says the men watched an air refueling tanker from the base. A tanker trails a boom carrying a row of red lights, and that row blinks in the same counting pattern the witnesses described. Each theory covers a piece of the night. The piece left over is the silence. A tanker low enough to fill a field with red light is not a quiet machine. 3 men stood under this thing, and they heard nothing at all. The Air Force never adopted any of these theories. Its letter stands. Norman Muscarello left for the Navy 3 weeks later, as planned. He served, came home, and told the story the same way for the rest of his life. He died in 2003. Bertrand died in 1998, and Hunt in 2011. 3 witnesses, with decades of chances to soften it or take it back. None of them did. The field outside Kensington is still there. The power line still crosses it. And every year on Labor Day weekend, downtown Exeter fills up with a festival about that night. There are speakers and music. Trolleys run all weekend, carrying people out to the spot where a teenager and 2 patrolmen stood in the dark. Whatever stood over that field came without one sound. 60 years of theories, and the silence is the peace none of them carries. Stand in that grass after dark and think about how quiet a machine the size of a barn would have to be. A teenager and 2 patrolmen stood there, under the real thing, and heard nothing at all. The Air Force put its answer in writing. Unidentified.